I now recognize Mr. Clyde for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman Raskin and Ranking Member Mace, for allowing me to join the subcommittee today to discuss this issue that is very much a personal interest of mine, making much-needed reforms to civil asset forfeiture proceedings to protect the due process rights of individuals. I say it's a personal interest because I myself was a victim of civil asset forfeiture. I had my assets seized by the Internal Revenue Service in 2013, over $940,000, without warning and without ever being charged with a crime. And I think we've heard that a lot today, without ever being charged with a crime. So how on earth does the Internal Revenue Service or any other government agency have the power to seize one's property without charging a person with a crime? It should not. But the IRS had been wrongfully confiscating money from individuals and small business owners across the country through civil asset forfeiture. Specifically, they were accusing people of structuring their legally earned cash bank deposits, and that's exactly what they did to me. In my case, the Internal Revenue Service offered me a deal to give back 2/3 of the $940,000 of my legally earned money if I would forfeit 1/3 to them as a penalty. They wanted me to voluntarily forfeit $325,000. Even though they admitted in writing that all the money was legally earned and properly reported in writing. This was nothing short of extortion, and I refused. They then threatened me with criminal prosecution to get a civil monetary settlement, which is a violation of legal ethics. And again, I refused because I had done nothing wrong. Long story short, I fought the Internal Revenue Service in court and eventually had my money returned, but it cost me $150,000. Unfortunately, too many Americans do not have the ability or the resources to take on the government, especially the Internal Revenue Service, and they wound up losing their businesses and livelihoods. But I couldn't stop there, so I found myself on the opposite side of this dais back in 2015. And there was a gentleman from the Institute of Justice, Rob Johnson, that sat right beside me, testifying against the Internal Revenue Service and their corrupt methods in a congressional hearing. My testimony before Congress resulted in the introduction of and the eventual enactment of the Clyde Hirsch-Sowers Respect Act, a bill that ensured individuals and small businesses were protected from unlawful cash seizures by the Internal Revenue Service over structuring. Those protections were a great start, and I'm thrilled to be here to learn more about how we can further reform our civil asset forfeiture laws so that we are protecting the due process rights of all Americans from being trampled on by all federal agencies, not just the Internal Revenue Service. In fact, I was excited to learn about the chairman's bill when he introduced it with Representative Wahlberg, the FAIR Act, and I wholeheartedly support its goals and policy. Civil asset forfeiture knows no partisan bounds, no ethnic bounds, as no person is immune to it, none. We can and we must do better, and so I wanted to use this opportunity to commend the chair's work on this bill and for holding today's hearing to shine a light on the perverse incentives of federal forfeiture proceedings and the need to strengthen civil liberties. One aspect I'm particularly interested in working on, which the FAIR Act looks to do, is bolstering the reporting requirements and data tracking of assets seized so that we can know whether civil forfeiture is being applied fairly to all citizens. In fact, Mr. Ruley brought up the very issue of the need for more transparency in his submitted testimony. And I find this important, Mr. Chairman, because eventually I'd like to see every individual wronged by civil asset forfeiture abuses made whole again. And we must have a better reporting system to make that happen, I believe. So, Mr. Ruley, a question for you. Recognizing that we need better data and reporting to right the wrongs moving forward, is there an avenue by which we could simultaneously look to retroactively right these wrongs? Well, I was fortunate to get my assets back. Too many people have thrown up their hands and succumbed to the abuse. They just want it to go away. That's all they want. And I realize there's no silver bullet to say to achieve my desired outcome, but is there any instrument you see that we could, wherein we could help these individuals? Thank you.
Thank you for that question and for your testimony here. It's so powerful. And I would just add that so many of the clients that we've had were in similar situations where prosecutors said, well, we'll give you 50% back, but we're keeping 50%, really extortion, even though there was no legal basis for the taking of that property. And that's why transparency and data is so important. We have to provide remedies for those whose property has been taken, and we have to know exactly what is happening. I get calls all the time from reporters saying they're having difficulty getting access to the data, certainly at the state level, and that requires right-to-know requests, freedom of information requests, great delay, great objections, but without real basis. And so, yes, I think the FAIR Act can take a major step forward in providing requirements that are carefully tailored to the abuses that we have seen so that we can get on top of the information we need, not only to prevent the future abuses, but to determine who's been abused, who's had their property wrongfully taken, and how we can provide a remedy for them. This is a very important part of this legislation, and I support it completely.
All right.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if you may, I would certainly appreciate the opportunity to work with you on that issue. If you
By all
are
means, thank you
interested
for
in
raising
that.
that. Thank you for your participation, Mr. Clyde. We welcome it, and we thank you for your excellent and revealing comments today. I was thinking about when you were talking about the shakedown, the extortion of 1/3 of your money when you hadn't done anything wrong and they were conceding it. St. Augustine once said that government without justice becomes just a band of robbers.
Correct.
And we don't want the police to be mimicking the tactics of the worst thieves on the street. So thank you very much for your participation.